Welcome to everybody. In this video I'm going to be doing an overview of the LMS Moguls that are in my collection. This amounts mainly to the models produced by Lima, Bachmann and Hornby. So without any further ado, let's start with the LMS crabs. This particular model here is a Lima one, and I believe they came out around about 1977. Now, for the time, I consider this to be quite a good model, and it is, for me anyway, it's captured the essence and the characteristics of that locomotive very well. There's some obvious shortcomings when we look at this model in the context of the later offerings from Bachmann, notably the very large or overscaled tender which houses the motor. But generally speaking, this is quite a well proportioned model with some good detail on it, and still can hold its own today. I think the driving wheels are slightly under scale, but that massive boiler and those massive inclined cylinders at the front, which give it that very characteristic look, I think Lima deserve full credit for actually producing something like this. Very characteristic and what we can say, excellent sort of locomotive. Moguls, it has to be said, carried out the donkey work on the railways. They were to be seen on all types of traffic. You'd seldom see them on frontline work in terms of scheduled expresses, either passenger or freight, but just about everything else they fulfilled a very useful utilisation of traffic on the railways. Now, I'm just concentrating on the LMS ones here because they're the ones that I've have most of. But right across the railways of Britain, Moguls fulfil the same types of functions. They just about pick up any work that was that the railways threw up to them, and they carried that out without any fuss, and largely out of sight of the more glamorous trains that you'd see on the railways. Perhaps they would have more regular workings on sort of local passenger trains, but you'd seldom see them on scheduled expresses or freight work. The next one along the line here is the model by Bachmann, and I think you can see from that this is more accurately detailed and possibly more accurately scaled. Certainly the driving wheels and certainly the pony truck at the front as well, they're much more accurately profiled. And of course the tender is in proportion to the locomotive on this model compared to the Lima. So we just have a look at some of the detail on this. And nicely lined out. Has to be said though that the Lima one also is quite well lined out. You got the boiler bands on that there, and also the safety valves and the whistle are nicely profiled on the Lima, as indeed they are on the Bachmann model. And again, those steeply inclined cylinders give it that particular look. And there's more detail in the cab, which in this particular model you can't see because the crew are in there. Next along the line is another crab. This one's in LMS Red. The first 100 of these locomotives were produced by the LMS by George Hughes, who was formerly of the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway. They were turned out in LMS Crimson Lake, which is actually telling you something as to their, what the LMS at the time thought of those locomotives in service, that they warranted passenger lining. Very capable, useful locomotives they were, and of course they carried on right into the British Railways era, right up until the end of steam. I think the last ones in service were in 1967, and they were based at Birkenhead. But they performed prodigious amounts of work, freight work, express freights, heavy mineral trains right across the network. I think you could actually see one of these in maroon on the heritage lines. I think it was a few years ago on the East Lancashire Railway. One of the preserved crabs was actually repainted in the striking LMS livery. Sort of moving on, this next model is also a Bachmann model, and this is the Stania version of the LMS crab. Now, interestingly, these locomotives were Stania's opening gambit for the LMS, but in 1933, and the order number for these was for 40 of the Hughes crab design, but as Stania took up his post, he ordered the drawing offices to come up with his views, or to translate his concepts into this design, and hence you get the characteristic Stania taper boiler. And the cylinders, strangely enough, are only slightly smaller than they are on the Hughes crab, but the main difference being, from an operational point of view, the boiler was pressed at 225 pounds to the square inch, so it didn't necessitate such large cylinders. And although this looks quite a compact locomotive compared to the Hughes crab, the Stania version actually came in at 2 tons heavier, which when you look at it, it doesn't appear to be the case. Again, you wouldn't see these locomotives on any sort of front line work, other than when they were stepping up as substitutes for failed locomotives. But again, they gave a good account of themselves, because all the pictures I see of these locomotives, they were working pretty impressive long and heavy and fast freight trains. Same size wheels as the Hughes crab, 5'6". That's on the top of the boiler. You've got a top feed there, not a dome, so it's a domeless boiler in effect. Interestingly, the ones that were, there was one that's preserved, and it was on the Severn Valley Railway, and that had a mainline certificate in the 1990s, and crews used to say that this locomotive performed really well, considering its size. I don't think they were expecting very much from it, but it proved that it was a good locomotive, and the crews certainly endorsed that. So that's a fine looking model from Bachmann, but in sort of day-to-day service, I suppose they were pretty anonymous, not really making a mark for themselves in the midst of the influx of Black 5s and 8Fs. Moving on, we've got the Bachmann version of the Ivert Mogul, sometimes referred to as the Flying Pig. And this is a very, again, like the Hughes Crab, this is a very characteristic looking locomotive. And as you can see, you've got a very high running plate exposing all the moving parts and external pipework, etc. These originally came out with a double chimney, which was found to be totally useless in terms of steam assisting with steam generation, and quite a lot of retrospective work had to be done on these engines to get them to steam in the manner to which it was expected. Once that was achieved, these were very good locomotives. Again, one of the niche sort of things that all these moguls could undertake is not only mainline work, but they could also operate on secondary lines and lines where there were restricted weights, and certainly the shape and size of the Ivot Mogul illustrates that. I think it's fair to say that these took something from the introduction of the USA Transportation Corps 280s that were built for Britain's and European railways during the Second World War. There's certainly a similar sort of look to them, of the running plate and the external pipework on them. So yeah, that's another fine representation of a characteristic locomotive that's been, it took a while for the model manufacturers to get around to these locomotives, which were probably in the order of the second niche, compared to the more famous types that the railways produced. Now, I know this is a BR standard, so please don't jump down my throat on this, but essentially it's a tidied up version of the LMS Ivot Mogul, and I thought it would warrant its inclusion in this overview, because essentially it's virtually identical. Certainly the driving wheels, the boiler, the cylinders are all the same, and in fact the locomotive weights came out the same as well. I think it was about 59 tons for both of them. Very similar sort of tender that you can see there. The next in the line is the Ivot Class 2 Mogul. Very neat little design, introduced in 1946. These were very successful. The only downside to them, which was not their fault, was that the jobs that they were designed for and the lines that they were designed to work on were rapidly disappearing. So in the case of passenger work, DMUs took over that very much in the 1950s, and a lot of line closures, again, it sort of limited them. You'd find that a lot of them being working on as station pilots, duties which they performed very well. The next one is a Hornby model, and this one is the BR Standard version of exactly the same LMS Ivot Mogul. There are detailed differences here. I suppose the main ones that you can see is the profusion of external pipework, which was a feature of BR standards, and you've got slightly curved in cab and tender sections, probably to assist with increased route availability. So this actually curves inwards, as does this part of the tender as well, unlike on the Ivot one, which is much more, well, it's all squared off, which you can see. The BR Standard version came in heavier than the LMS version, but in essence these locomotives were pretty much identical. Anyway, I'll end it there, and yes, let me know what you think of these locomotives in the comments. Thank you very much.